So, Jose,
Yes, Javi.
so here we are talking to a nice group of people from the Writers Guild. We are here, in fact, courtesy and thanks to the Writers Guild. Why are we doing this, Jose? We were asked to kind of give an introduction about why we're doing this. Why are we
What
doing
are
this?
we, what are we gonna do tonight, Brian? Are we gonna,
The same thing we always do. Plot to take over the world.
we're here
No,
because we're bored and we're shut in and we got cabin fever and we no. Well, yes, partly because of
yes, no, that's absolutely
um,
true. We actually have a
yeah.
lot.
But also because we know that there's a lot of nerves and anxiety among the general populace, but definitely among writers who are trying to figure out what the hell is
Mhm.
next. How does work happen now? And although we don't have any of those answers for anybody, you're working right now. I'm not. The we always feel like if we can do anything to help, take the edge off, take the anxiety off, just chat, try to be useful, try to give advice where we have it. Then that's um, if Rohan calls, Gondor will answer. I got it backwards. Fuck, I got it backward.
Right.
Gondor calls, Rohan will answer. My bad,
Right.
everybody.
Uh, we're,
So we're here to see what people want to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that if people take nothing else from this session, I would want to say that please keep your spec pilots under 60 pages for the love of all that is holy.
You know what? You know
I
what
mean,
I just realized? I have
but
a pilot that
mhm.
hasn't been going out much. But maybe this is why. I went to look at it the other day. It's fucking 74 pages.
What the hell's the matter with you,
I
dude?
know. I
No, what's going
know.
on? You can't do that. That's ridiculous. I literally gave somebody a lecture today because their pilot was like 67 pages, and like you're at 74. You're killing me, dude.
I know. I know. So I need to go in there and cut at least 5 pages out. Although I have
How about
heard that
try 14? Try 14 pages.
no, I'm not going to 14 pages. Because here's the thing, though. Like, as much as I agree that you want to bring your pilot in at 60 or under, there is a certain like when I wrote the Inquisition script,
Uh,
um,
a great script.
I was right around 60, and I
Mhm.
actually made a point of going back in there to add 3 pages, because there is sort of this streaming premium cable cachet where the
Right.
scripts are longer because you get the full hour.
Yeah, but
So
you still wind up shooting 49 pages because your director is going to. It's not like L.A. Law where you could write a 54-page or 60-page script and it just be one and one. It's like the director wants to do crane shots and shit, you know? So,
I know, but you get a script in front of you and you go like this, and you
and
go, ooh, premium
that press,
cable.
and then you hold the lesser script and you go, oh, that feels like network. Really? That's that.
You go, yeah. You go like, oh, CW, ooh, HBO.
This reminds me of that Kids in the Hall sketch where it was about a preacher who was trying to explain that the Bible was superior to the Bhagavad Gita because it's actually a longer book, because it's just physically a larger book.
There you go.
How about, shall we take a question? Hey, let's take a question
Let's take
because
a
I think,
question. Let's stop rambling.
yes.
Okay, cool. So, first question comes from Jim McDermott, and he asks, I find it's really hard to focus on writing for the kinds of stretches I'm used to. I feel like that's to be expected, but I wonder, are there things you're doing that are helping you write in the midst of all this? He also says you guys are so great for doing this. Lots of love to you both.
Well, that's very sweet. Thank you. Miller, are you actually, by the way, Jose, I have nicknamed Jose Miller. His name is Molina. It means Miller in Spanish. That's a thing. So if I ever call him that, don't be confused. Are you writing anything currently? Like, are you doing any spec work
I'm
currently, or
not.
what's?
I've been up to my eyeballs in pitches, so
Mhm,
I'm working on like a handful of different pitch documents. But I
mhm.
mean, I totally get what Jim is saying, and this is something that I've talked about to on Twitter to a couple of people. There's times where the full day stretches, I haven't even really attempted those.
Right.
Um, but the there's been days where I can't. I just can't. I can't even, as the kids say. So, but there's other days where like writing is actually the kind of a lifesaver, kind of a distraction from reading the news or the anxiety of like people texting me or the dogs going crazy or whatever it is. That it's actually a nice refuge, but it's completely understandable and normal to be completely fucked up right now. The one sort of piece of advice that I would give is that this is sort of like a kind of writer's block on steroids where you can psych yourself out to such a degree because there's so much on your head that you go, I can't even. Drag yourself in front of your computer and open the file and see what happens. But I think a lot of us just circle because it's the nature of what we do, and it's easy to procrastinate. It's easier than ever now. Whenever I feel like I can't even, I'll just force myself to come into this room and open the file and see what's there, and maybe I'll get. And what's happened is I'll say like I'm gonna go easy on myself. I'll do half an hour, and then 2.5 hours later, I'm like, hey, I got some progress.
Well, I don't know. See, I doodle compulsively, as many of our viewers probably know, and I have these glyphs that I do when I'm nervous. So they kind of look like this, right? And here's where the stack is currently of glyphs, and it's all that. And the stack has been growing bigger and bigger. So like I just honestly, even if I can't write, I'll sit at my desk, and even if I'm just doodling. It's just to try to get some sort of traction of just even sitting here. I mean, I think that this is a really difficult time, and I think people have to be forgiving of themselves. But I think you also kind of show up and putter, and you're in your office or your writing space, whatever it is, and you try. I mean, I also have the blessing right now that I do have I'm still working on Cowboy Bebop, so I get to, and I'm on assignment for that, so I do have deadlines and things like that. But I think more than anything, like you kind of need to forgive yourself if you haven't written the great American novel in these 5 weeks of quarantine, because the world is falling apart all around us. That's a thing. Should we go for the next question?
Yeah, Jim. Hope that helps.
What?
The next question comes from Chris Rafferty, and he asks, Zoom rooms. If you were running one, what new skills for this virtual environment would you be looking for in your writers? And are pants a thing of the past?
Miller, you're a bigger expert on pants than I am. Are you wearing your Captain America jammies?
I am.
That is awesome, dude. I love that. That's the best.
Pants are a thing of the past.
Have you done pitches without pants on? Like, just what is that? Have you been on Zoom calls without your pants on?
I mean, like this. I have a pant-like substance covering my nether.
I've now done. Yeah.
Yeah. Why wear jeans if you don't have to? I'm a fucking fraud. What the fuck? I don't care.
I'm wearing. I mean, I. Here's the thing. I find that I have to get dressed every day. I'm not wearing my jeans today, which is really unusual. I'm actually wearing khakis today. Right.
Yeah.
But I find that if I don't get dressed, if I don't, shower, shave, look, I already have 2 kids. So and one of them's 4 years old, the other one's 8 months old. So like the temptation to just kind of be at home in my shorts all day. But I find that, taking a shower and getting ready for the work day and then showing up at my office, even though it's in my home, fully dressed and all that, it really helps me set that transition. And I do the same, I've been pitching stuff via Zoom. Bebop has not had a Zoom room yet, but I've also been working with some partners on development stuff via Zoom. And I feel like, you have to draw a boundary between your personal life and your professional life, especially when you're working at home. And I think this was true when I was just freelancing or during those times when I'm not working on a show. You have to, for me, I have to be ready and I have to show up. And for the Zoom rooms are exhausting. And what makes them exhausting is that you don't have, I heard a great quote recently, which is that the conversations that matter are the ones that don't count. And I think that the biggest set of skills that you're going to have to get to do that, and I don't know what the solution is somehow to compensate for the fact that you get your best material in a writer's room when people go to get coffee together, when they wind up in the bathroom at the same time and make a joke about it. Like people have to have that level of comfort, and I find that that's not showing up in Zoom as much, and I think that that's the biggest thing is going to be sort of being able to read people, being able to understand people. I mean, at least you get to see my office, so maybe you pick up something about who I am from that, but I don't know. I mean, have you been doing a lot of collaboration?
Is there a skill then that you would seek out that's any different? For me, I don't know that there is. I guess if anything, maybe I would look for someone who's a little less chatty than normal, but I feel like I'm still looking for the best writer, the most engaged person who gets the show the best.
Well, if you're interviewing somebody via Zoom, but if you're already in the writer's room doing Zoom, one of the things that I think is going to be good for, like, a lot of shows are already doing Zooms, and I think that the shows that are, like, I think the real set of new skills is going to come in when people start doing Zoom rooms that they haven't been in the room before. Right now, for example, with the show I'm working on, we all know each other because we worked on the first season, and then we spent a good 3 months together working on the show. So that made it, that makes it easy to get on a Zoom room because that you can bullshit around and all that. I think when you start doing Zoom rooms where like nobody knows each other and all that, that's going to be, and frankly, look, a lot of people are going to be talking about this period in our history as an excuse to save money and not get writers' offices or conference rooms. I think that is a huge mistake. I think you need the human contact of it, and I think that this is kind of a poor substitute.
I read an article about written by a therapist about how Zoom and FaceTime and Blue Jeans is sort of not only exhausts you, but it leaves you feeling disconnected. I forget the exact terminology that she used, but you're basically not getting the neuroreceptors that are triggered when you're face to face with another human being when you're on FaceTime. There's none of that body language and that sort of ineffable thing that you get from being in a room with somebody else. The one Zoom room that I know that has started after this, the showrunner hired people that she had worked with before, just to have that kind of shorthand.
Yeah, I think that what I would say the skill you need to acquire is the advocacy to fight the ascendancy of video conferencing as a substitute to the writer's room.
Right.
So I think the other thing I would say, by the way, is never drink a carbonated beverage during a presentation or a pitch. That's
You've said this before.
I know, but I'm addicted to these. I mean, I literally drink 6 of them a day. It's terrible. So, shall we go for the next question? Was that a reasonable answer? Yeah, let's go for the next question. Okay.
Okay, next question comes from Teddy Tenenbaum. He says, do you think that upward of 45 minutes for a TV series pitch length is still appropriate for Zoom or phone pitches? And do you think that there are any modifications or extras that are smart for writers to include in these days of Zoom/phone pitches?
I think you need to learn how to use the screen sharing function seamlessly so that if you have a visual aid, you can do that. I think the pitches that I have been doing in the last couple of weeks, we have been cutting them down like just ruthlessly because 45 minutes on Zoom is just too damn much. And again, if you're not in the same room with somebody, you're just at a certain point, it's like just someone on it's like the TV yelling at you. It's like when you go to your parents' house and Fox News is on. It's just somebody going and so I think
if you're on a screen, sorry to interrupt, Javi, but if you're on a screen, you have the usual temptation of you have 15 tabs open. You're going to be like, I wonder if they'll realize that I'm checking Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I've been doing the exact same thing. Like I had a pitch that was timing out long, and I cut about 10 minutes out of it, and I practiced it on Monday, and it was still 35. So I went back in, and I took out shit that normally I would never cut. Stuff about character and sort of story that I think that people want to hear, but right now it's like, do you get this? Do you sort of get the ballpark of this character is her doctor and he cares for her enough? You kind of get where that story is going to go. So I think 20 to 25, if you can do it, I would say is optimal.
Yeah, I think the one we went out with a feature pitch. It started at 25 minutes, and we shaved it down to 15 because we were finding that the attention span is a lot lower. And I think also this puts a little bit more onus on the written word, because one of the things that producers have been asking us to do is to give them the pitches in writing, even though we're doing it verbally, because some people now it's just going to be easier for them to focus on a written document than whereas before you'd go into the meeting and you'd be in the meeting and you'd have the meeting and that would be it. I think that now the follow-ups are going to be a lot different. And I think that what you write down for your pitch document, you can put all of that stuff in there and somebody might wind up reading it even after you've pitched them verbally. So it's still kind of a brave new world. Look, a lot of the answers here are going to be like, it's still a work in progress, but that my experience has been that pitches need to be a lot more shorter and a lot more to the point. Because it's just, and I've already gotten people calling, and talking to people who are saying like, yeah, we did this pitch, and like the guy was looking at his email the entire time, and we could tell because he was, on his computer, but he was looking at the email on his phone or whatever. So the temptation is just too much to not pay attention to the little postage stamp on your screen,
And the screen sharing thing is also something that I found useful because you do kind of have a captive audience. So if you want to go look here for a few seconds, I mean, I think I only keep them on like 5, maybe 15 seconds, so that they look at it. But then I want to go back to faces and I want to go back to the screen. But visuals and using the share screen is something that I've already found is really useful.
But as with live pitch, go ahead. What?
Here's a question for you. Do you, I found myself, usually I have the pitch, if I'm pitching, I have the pitch on the table and I'm pitching up here, and I'm trying to make eye contact, and I sort of do this, and I'll make sure that I'm where I need to be. You've seen it. You've done it with me. But now that I'm up here, I tend to have the document open on screen. So
all the time, you're like, so anyway, and then this happens, and then that happens, and the people are like, why am I seeing the side of your face instead of the front of your face? That sort of thing.
Well, but while you're pitching, like I'm talking to the screen right now, I'm looking at you. It doesn't look like I'm making eye contact with you. In order to make eye contact, I'd have to look here, and it'd be like, oh, Javi, I'm making eye contact with you.
Oh,
right? But so normally your eyes are down here, so now I can be down here reading my document and having a lot closer tabs on what I've written. You use view screens.
It's on a stand, and what I do is I put but here's the thing, so I've been doing a lot of Skype meetings because I wanted to meet more writers and all of that, so I've been meeting people on Skype. On Skype, what you can do is you can actually make put the other person's window right here, so that I literally put the other person's window on top of my own eyes, so that I'm actually just looking at them straight up, and I'm looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and I can see that I'm looking straight at the screen, and that makes it a lot easier, and it stops some of this. When you have, I also find if I'm pitching, I just put the pitch straight in front of the computer, so that whenever I look up, I'm looking straight up like that. Because it's, again, one of the big drawbacks of pitching via this virtual thing is that, like, you don't know who's next to you. You don't know who's looking at their computer. And what your windows show might not be what the actual windows are on the other person's screen. So but what I find is also because I have my iPad on this little stand here, right?
Right.
So I can actually put that behind my computer, and all of that. But then you get into issues of where's my computer camera, and is it accentuating my double chin or not? Because so there's a lot of aesthetic considerations that happen.
Just to clarify, though, I'm saying that that's kind of a benefit of Andy.
Okay. Here's Indy. Here's my daughter. Hey, Indy. Yeah, let me get her. Hey, Indy.
I'm saying that it's a benefit of pitching on Zoom because you are able to more seamlessly look at what you're pitching without it looking like you're doing this and like you don't know what you're talking about. Although the one truly weird thing about Zoom calls and Zoom pitching, especially, is that you're seeing your mug yapping at you. Like, I don't want to see myself talk. I don't want to look at the chins and the waddle and the whatever. I want to be able to to just go like that. So anyway, Brave New World.
Well, now you've all met my daughter, and she's adorable, and there you go. So let's get the next. It sounds like you got this one. Let's get the next question.
Yeah.
Next question. It comes from Shambly Smith. Obviously, no one has a real sense of when and how the industry is coming back and in what form. But do you see any trends in terms of sweeping changes this may have? Are rooms on track to be smaller? Is staffing dwindling?
I would say, look, in terms of staffing, I don't know that staffing will dwindle necessarily. It's a very interesting thing because as I'm tackling my own development, I'm beginning to realize I have no idea what the world's going to look like in 6 months. We can kind of theorize about it, but I think that you're going to see a lot more development of fantasy, sci-fi, and those kinds of shows. Probably less fantasy now, because there's shows like Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings and all of these things that are going to be coming out now later than before. And broadcasters and streamers are going to want to know how those shows do before they commission anything else. I'm finding that development-wise, pretty much everything is stopped, and that people are still trying to figure out what the next move is even before they enact it. So there's a couple of things. I think that in terms of production, I don't think that shows are going to start looking like soap operas all of a sudden. But wow, I think that for example, the technology that they use to make The Mandalorian is going to become a lot more prevalent because I think they have to figure out how to get less than 200 people into a soundstage. Right now there's so many people who work in a film crew, and I think the biggest hit is going to be actually below the line, because I think that they're going to look to streamline every part of production and have the least amount of people possible together. And I think that production is also going to move more to sound stages. I think that there's going to be a lot less of these big epic shows because, it requires a great deal of international travel and it requires a great deal of location work and all of that. So I think this is going to be a big...
He's going to hit genre stuff the hardest.
Thankfully, Jon Favreau and The Mandalorian have figured out how to do this all with rear projection and large LED screens. So, maybe that'll be...
For a lot of money.
No, that's true. That's true, and we're actually looking at that for another show, and it's that same thing. It's that basically all of that technology is on The Mandalorian right now. But I think that if I owned the companies that are making that technology, I would be trying to ramp up production as quickly as possible because I think that may wind up being a lot of the future of especially genre TV is shooting on stages. I was thinking about this the other day because one of my daughter's favorite movies is Singing in the Rain, and the thing Singing in the Rain is about the transition between silent films and talkies. But one of the things that happened the moment that silent films went to talkies is that the state of the art technologically of film went down considerably. If you compare like Sunrise, which is probably the apex of silent film, versus any of those first talkies, the first talkies looked really clunky because they had figured out what to do with the camera, how to run around with it, all this stuff, make these great shots, and then suddenly you had to be on a stage so that you could get the sound capture you needed. So I think we're going to see something like that at the end or as this pandemic goes on, which is that I think TV is actually going to look a little bit or a lot different than it has in the last 10 years because the mode of production is going to change significantly. And it may actually wind up looking more primitive or more like TV did at an earlier time. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll only be for a couple of years. But, the thing that I can't see is how we're going to do this. The most expensive thing on any movie is time. The thing that you want to save the most is time because you have a crew of people getting paid by the hour for the most part. So if you're going to be safe, if you're going to be socially distanced, if you're going to have to wait for someone to be done with the camera case before you can approach it, if there's no crafty, if the hair and makeup people and hair and makeup, wardrobe, all the people that deal with actors are going to have to be their temperatures taken, their brushes sanitized, their gloves, all this shit is gonna add to time. So I think production faces a really huge challenge. Interestingly, though, Javi, you were saying that you feel like development is kind of shut down. I have weirdly found that people, because it's something that they can do, it's something that they are doing. Like I'm getting a bunch of projects sort of coming my way. Now I haven't yet sold one. We're gonna go out with the first one next week. But
Didn't invite.
What's that?
And you didn't invite me. I'm teasing you.
So I feel like the writing is probably going to be one of the least affected things. It's still going to be affected, obviously. But I think we as writers, because our work tends to be so much this anyway, us in an office, and we can do Zoom rooms for a while. But ultimately, there's no point in writing the scripts if you can't shoot them. So we are going to hit.
I think what I was going to say about development is that, like, I have 2 shows that were like just at the script to network phase, and those are not getting greenlit anytime soon, obviously. So I think that's more what but I think also, this pandemic hit at a really interesting time, because all of a sudden, this literally hit within the 2 months when Peacock and HBO Max were going to launch and are probably still going to launch, right? So what you're looking at then is those broadcasters were looking at, okay, we've got this opening slate, let's see how that works out, and then we'll start buying things based on what worked out, what didn't, what we want to accentuate on our service. And even if their launch dates happen, like they have whatever they have in development or not, but it's a very odd time. Not that I'm to tell you that, but it's like, so they're not greenlighting anything that they had before. They may be buying new stuff, but then what new stuff they buy also has to do with what is our brand identity. And there's at least 2 of the major streamers that don't know yet because they haven't had a chance to test out who they are.
Yeah.
It's I think that the next year is going to be bewildering, and the choices and the choices made by executives and by networks are going to seem very arbitrary because everybody's just trying to prognosticate, and it's hard.
By the way,
I think,
the world of television wasn't completely crazy as it was.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like I remember having several conversations with my friend and yours, John Rogers, when I was working with him last year, and we were both, we're old veterans of this shit. We were both going like, "This is crazy town. The round was like this." And so it was crazy town a year ago. It's gonna be fucking lunatic.
But I don't think staffing is dwindling. I think that there has to be staffing because people need shows written. So I think that part of it, you're always going to need people to actually write these things. And I don't think the rooms are going to get any smaller because they're pretty small as it is. And that varies a lot anyway. But I think it's still going to be a lot about, the showrunner, how many people they need to do how many episodes. Let's move on to the next question because we've blithered on about this one for a while.
Yep. Doug, Deb, next question, please.
So, that would be from Daniel Zucker, who says, "I'm looking to improve my skill at architecting a satisfying plot, building the mousetrap. I find this to be more challenging than theme or character. Any tips on how to write a better plot?"
Interesting. When I break story for myself, or when I work, I always, there's only one question that I ask myself, and it's what needs to happen next. And if I don't have if I don't have the answer for that, then I don't have anything to put up. And that usually is more of a plot question than a character question because I know the characters already. So my personal story breaking is literally all about satisfying the question of what needs to be next. And keeping that at the forefront of my mind is sort of the way that I break anything when I'm not working with a team. I don't know, Jose, do you have I'm sure I have some plot secrets, but I need to think about it for a second, perhaps while Jose talks.
Yeah. First of all, hey Danny, and hello to Chris. We've gotten a handful of people that I know. Thank you all for showing up.
Thank you.
What I would say is, I don't know if you're familiar with Trey Parker's philosophy of but then. Which is a brilliant way of building an episode. And it kind of goes to what you're saying, Javi, which is what has to happen next. For him, when you stack scenes next to each other, every scene has to, from a story standpoint, be a but or a then. So this happens, ergo then. this happens, or this happens, but it gets fucked up by the other thing. So I think that's always helpful. The other thing is I'm pointing to my board, as you guys can clearly see. I actually have a handful of little things that I've written that are there on my board permanently, and one of them it says "oh shit" moments, by which I mean as I'm sort of thinking about the whole thing, I try to think of like a couple of moments that make you go, "oh shit, I didn't see that coming." I just try to blow your own mind with a thing that seems cruel or bizarre, or just make the hardest left turn, and then if it works, if I like it enough, I may bend the rest of the plot to that twist, or as the case may be, I may bend it away from it so that when you get to the twist, it's more of a reveal.
I would also suggest that you buy William Wallace Cook's book Plotto. No, I don't suggest that you buy it, but it's interesting. So this is a book. Do you know about this book? Have I told you about this, Jose?
No.
So Plotto. So this guy wrote like 250 novels. He was like one of those guys who banged one out every week. And then this was his guide. He basically wrote down a choose your own adventure plotting system where he would literally pick one from a certain page, then go to the next page, and he like actually indexed it so that it would say what needed to lead to the next thing. So you could just use Plotto. Of course, if you use Plotto, William Wallace Cook worked in the 20s and 30s, so you're going to sound really old timey, but Plotto. I don't know. I think you want the opposite of formulaic. You want something unique, but I think that also if you look at just sort of classic serialized, I'm amazed. I'm talking about classic serialized TV breaking technique. Like that's a thing we had until like 10 years ago. The way we did Lost was, and pretty much every serialized show I've worked on is that you put the tentpoles up on a board and then you narrow down from the macro. And I find that in plotting individual episodes, much as you plot a season of Lost with the Dark Crystal or whatever, where you put your whiteboard and you say, these are the tentpoles we have to hit. And then the work becomes to kind of narrow your way down to what makes those tentpoles inevitable. And I find for an individual script, that's also a really good way of doing it, which is know what the 4 set pieces, tentpole events, whatever the heck it is that you have to. And I think because you have it right when every scene appears to be inevitable to the next scene, something like that, right?
Yeah. So I'll let you in on the 5 things that are at the bottom of my board. I shared oh shit moments, life-changing choices. You want the characters to be driving the plot. So you want to try to have like a life-changing choice in there. The emotional want, what is it that they want? Urgency for plot. You want to put the pedal to the metal. Although some would disagree that you want to slow things down. I like urgency. And clear stakes. What is it that you're fighting for? What is it that you're after?
But I think even if you're writing a show that's a slow burn, I think that, like let's say that your script is 6 scenes, and they're all 15 minutes long, whatever. It's all about creating that sense of inevitability. And I think that's what you're talking about. Everything you're talking about is about how do you get the scenes to stack up that way, right? To interlock.
Yeah.
Jose, I have to ask you a question. Who are those 2 square dudes behind you?
These 2 square dudes were present from our friend and fan, Americo Alvaranga.
Those 2 look familiar? That's us from about 5 years ago, isn't it?
It was, yeah, when I still had the long hair. And you had the cuff.
Yeah, we've gotten a little less angular in the time since. So next question, let's hear it.
All right, next question comes from Stephen Day. And he asked, putting together 2 Bibles for separate projects to take out with my manager. He wants me to put photos for the characters. Do you find this helps executives visualize? Is there anything else like this that you either prioritize or avoid when putting together pitch docs or Bibles? Thanks so much.
I used to hate that. Like I was a network executive between 1993 and 95. And I remember back then, our saying was that the more crap the person brought into the room, the worse the pitch would be. So when somebody brought in a board with all of these, sort of headshots of famous actors, we actually sort of looked down on that. And I've sort of had that attitude for most of my life. And then in the last 5 or 6 years, I've just said, F it. You know what? We have this technology. We've got Photoshop. We've got all this stuff. So let's just go ahead and use it. And our pitches, when Jose and I pitched our thing that we did, that you can see on the Children of Tendu website, we did the whole thing. We actually had an artist who had designed the game we were adapting, and we said, hey, we want Chris Pine, Haley Atwell, this actor, that actor, and that person went out and draw those characters from the game as those actors. And I think if you start, I think it's incredibly helpful because it makes it easy to visualize. And I think shows have gotten much more complicated. I think that plots in shows have gotten much more complicated. I think that the amount of characters and their development and all that is much more complicated than it was in 1995. And I think now visual aids, maybe it's just me that I've turned around, but I think visual aids are almost crucial now because, you sort of need to give your audience more anchors to kind of get into. I don't know. What do you think, Jose? Mark Strong, good choice. Hey, are there any women in the show? What's going on there, Jose? No, okay, very good. But do you remember, Jose? So Jose, wow, okay. The De La Vegas are very important in this show. Jose. So Jose and I went out with a show where there would have been how many characters were there? Like 20 characters in this show over the course of a season.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and we cast everybody, a dream cast, and then the pitch was literally like Jose and I being like blackjack dealers, just throwing and then this happens, and then this guy comes in and all that, and it was sort of a messy and fun pitch. We didn't sell the project, so maybe it wasn't that much fun, but I think it was
hugely helpful because you also you kind of cast the archetype. So we had like a Zen kung fu guy, and so we went with like Keanu Reeves, and so you go, oh, it's Keanu Reeves, it's the Zen kung fu guy. So I find it incredibly useful. It allows you, like, you don't want people going, wait, there was a guy and his name was, and what the fuck? If you see Emma Stone is playing Betty and it's written right there, you know to go back and you go, oh, Betty, yeah, the Emma Stone type.
Yeah, and if it's a physical card, sometimes you just even pick it back up and go, remember him, So I think that a lot of it is, but here's the thing, if you're going to do that for a pitch, if you're doing it for like a Bible or a written document or something, you need to kind of have a little bit of a design sensibility about how you put this stuff together. And I think that if you're doing it live and you're using visual aids, you need to rehearse with the visual aids. You need to know how to manipulate them, how to use them. You need to make that presentation seamless because much as I think earlier we were talking about Zoom etiquette and how awkward it is when like you can't hear somebody and you're like, oh, let me try this, let me try that. There's nothing more awkward than when you're fumbling around with boards or with HDMI cables in somebody's conference room. So, it adds a layer of complexity and you need to kind of be rehearsed in that and know what, and sort of know how you can improvise with those things and all that because it does get very awkward, I find. But yes, we're now engaged in visual aids. I've embraced it. I used to say, you go in that room and you're selling yourself as the person who has this vision. Now I say use all of the tools at your disposal because they all help.
Yeah.
So,
all right, next question.
Hey, so we've been sorting the questions by when they came in, but since there's so many piled up, we thought that we would switch to the one going in order of how many likes they have. So for all the attendees, if you have a question that you especially see that you want answered, go ahead and throw a like on that thing so we know how to sort them.
We're like Reddit.
Okay, next one. Yeah, like Reddit, kind of upvote situation. So next one comes from Christine Huntley. She says, what are your thoughts on pitching a project versus sending a spec script during this time? If you have an existing spec with producers attached, is it better to send the spec for people to read it, or is it better to pitch it with producers in the Zoom room?
I have an idea about that. Miller, do you want to go first, or should I get in there?
I mean, I would. Yeah, if you have a specific thought, I'm just going to take my own stab in the dark.
Look, I think that this is the same question it was before the pandemic. I think that it's do you spec it out or do you pitch it? And every time and the problem with that is that every time you tell somebody this is what you're going to do, they tell you that they don't do that anymore. You're like, I want to pitch my pilot. Oh, we don't take pilot. People don't like pilot pitches anymore. I want to send a spec. Oh, specs are out. The spec market is cold. So if you are already in a situation where you've got attachments or you have a studio and you're going to pitch it, or you have a representation that is sending you out to pitch this thing, I always say pitch it, because that way you get a quicker response. If you're able to convey your vision very clearly and strongly, then people, immediately will know whether they like it or not. I find reading scripts, and I've been reading a lot of scripts because of the Solidarity Challenge. Look, reading scripts is exhausting. Even if you're reading 10 William Goldman scripts in a row, you're still reading 10 scripts in a row. And if the ninth script is not going to get the same kind of hearing as the first one. So I think pitch. I'm a firm believer in if you can get in a room to pitch, get in the room to pitch. If you need to write that script for yourself, or if or if you're paid money to write the script, then do it. But I think I will always err on the side of pitch versus spec, even though I've written specs myself. It just seems to be a faster, quicker way to get a yes or a no, without having to go through that work. But your thoughts?
And if you pitch it, you'll probably be asked to leave the script behind if a script exists. Mm-hmm. And they'll go, oh yeah, we get it. We're in or we're out. But it sounds like you're talking about a specific thing where you have producers and an existing script. Mm-hmm. I would ask your producers to feel out the buyers. That's kind of what they're there to do. Ask them if they want to hear it or if they want to read it, and let them tell you.
I think it's interesting because one of the things that's happening with our everything is so disrupted now, and everything was disrupted in the last 2 years with streamers and with everything that's going on in the business. It's kind of become much less formal, and I don't mean formal like we're wearing suits and ties. I mean formal like there are forms to how you do things. It used to be, well, you do this, you do that, you do the other thing. And it feels like now it's a lot easier, and you're more likely to get a yes answer if you just ask for the thing you'd rather do. And I think what Jose's saying is very canny, is that if you're working with a producer or you're working with representation that's going to get you in the room, then having those people make those calls and say, hey, would you rather read it or pitch it? If you're ready to do both, you should be ready to do both, especially if you do have a script, either send it in or pitch. I'll tell you what, I have a show that I'm going out with right now that's a Spanish language show, right? Or it might be a Spanglish show, depending on whether an American broadcaster wants it. But the interesting thing about that is I've had to write the pitch in Spanish and in English. And literally, the day that they tell me, here's who we're pitching to, I go, well, do they want it in English or in Spanish? And that's how I'll do the pitch. So I think the more agile you are in terms of which road you want to take. And
of television writers.
Huh?
You are the Eddie Izzard of television writers. French and German.
French, do it in Arabic, yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, look, I think that the more flexible and agile you are in terms of what options you can give your producer, the more likely you are to come up with the right option for the right executive for the place you're going to. Next, I think next question. Yeah, next question. Yep.
So next question comes from Leyland J. Anderson. Can you talk about some of the unknown unknowns of staffing? It's important for emerging writers to know that they can do everything right, and things outside their control can mean they don't get the job, and nothing about them or their writing will affect that. Thanks for doing this.
Whenever I don't get a job, my stock answer is, well, if they hate success and money that much, there's nothing I can do to help them. And that's kind of how I go through life. Like, if I don't get a job, it's not my fault. It's like they But look, as somebody who staffed a show, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is watch the movie Moneyball, because staffing is basically money Tetris. Like, you're literally trying to put together you have a set budget and you're trying to put together the best staff you can for the least amount of money to get the most people in there, because they give you a lump sum and then you have to figure out how you divide it between people who are getting co-EP, EP money, and then all the way down to staff writer. So it's a very difficult thing to do to staff a show, because you're not just looking for people who are good, you're looking for people who are good going to be good in the room together, but you can't get them in a room together until you get them in a room together, so you have to be a good judge of character about that and make sure that you're getting the dynamics right. So look, you might not get a job because maybe they've hired somebody who's a lot like you already. You might not get a job because maybe they have a co-EP who, already they know that this person works best with this kind of person, or that person has this skill set covered. I remember, in staffing sometimes You even look at scripts, and so you might go, well, this person's not the most dynamic writer, but I know that they're really good in the room, and every recommendation that I'm getting is telling me that they can do this managerial job or that, and you might wind up hiring that person because of what they do outside the page, and what they do on the page is fine, but it may not be, but that this person can be a hinge. So honestly, if you don't watch Moneyball and imagine that you didn't get the job because you're not that guy. Do you remember the guy in Moneyball who was the Greek god of walks? That they put him in the because he would always be walked, and because he was walked, and there would be runs. Maybe you're not the Greek god of walks, and you can't. You're just not the right click there. Jose.
Let's. I wanna throw out a couple of the unknown unknowns because it's a really interesting question because there's literally 1,000 reasons why you might not get the gig, even though you could be perfect for it. There could be. I was on a show. Like it could be like they're promoting from within. Like if you're looking for a staff writer kind of gig, they might have an assistant that they want to bump up. I was on a show where it had been a little bit of a battle to get all the writers that the showrunner wanted. I was the number 2, and I was right there with him, sort of trying to figure out the moves. And the last couple of openings came down to, all right, the network let us have these people that they were kind of not thrilled about, so now we're going to give them their people. We think these 2 candidates are great, but they think these 2 candidates are great for whatever reasons, because they give it a meeting, because whatever the fuck the reason might be. So you might lose out on the job because of simple politics.
Somebody has an overall studio and they don't have development, so they got to put them in a show so that they get their money's worth. That person goes into the show, then the show has to offset the overall deal money. That comes out of the show's budget, right? And then the next thing, they don't need 5. They can't get 5 staff writers because they're paying somebody who they had to take in as an over. So that's a huge one, Jose.
There's ones where we didn't have a lot of money for the staff, so we ended up hiring a team that was kind of on the level with another writer. I think I was leaning slightly more towards the individual writer, but the staff was small, so we wanted an extra body in the room, so we went with the team.
Right.
So there's just a million unknown unknowns. It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, the degree to which it's not your fault to not get a job is so vast. I mean, look, every once in a while you hear a story about somebody who really screwed themselves out of a job in the room. Like they accidentally insulted the showrunner's mother or something like that. That's a true story. But by and large, most people don't do that. By and large, you go in, you give a great meeting, and unless you dropped your pants, you probably did a great meeting. It's just that it is a machine with a million moving parts putting together a staff, and you might just not have been the right cog. And it's a hard pill to swallow because when things don't go your way, it's really you really want to ascribe blame, but it's not always. It's just not always that. Sometimes the no comes without any context, and it's easy to kind of focus on yourself as the context, but it usually is not.
Yeah, most of the time it's not even about you.
Dude, we're bleeding at attendees. We got to get more interesting now. Let's be more interesting. Ready?
Take my shirt off.
Okay. No. Okay. Next question.
Okay. Next question comes in anonymously. Any suggestions for writers going out for staffing season for the first time this year and only with a manager submitting them? How can you effectively manage the process and secure recs that can help you? Thanks.
That's interesting. Well, first of all, look, with a manager, they tend to be a little less aggressive in terms of staffing than agents are, because just of the nature of management versus agenting. I think that's a huge part of it. But in terms of how do you platform yourself to get the most recs and all that, look, that's year-round work. You have to be meeting people. You have to, building a professional network of friends, not of people that you've networked and asked for advice for. And if you're asking that question during staffing season, that means that you've got 6 to 8 months of work that you're behind on, especially when it comes to recommendations and things like that. I get a lot of requests from friends to recommend them for jobs, and I usually do because most of them are people I've worked with that I know they're good and I can put my name behind them. So, but those are relationships that are really, really extensive. I think the other thing is you should know who your manager represents. You should know what connections they have inside of what shows, just to see if that helps you. IMDb and IMDb Pro are very useful for that. A lot of
harder thing to do now that there's that it's managers and not agents, because it used to be, you were repped at WME and you went like, here's Rob Thomas, here's Drew Pleck, here's blah blah blah. These guys are represented by WME. Guys, push it. Now you can't do that anymore.
Right. So it's again, in terms of recommendations and things like that. Look, I think this is a time when most showrunners and writers, a lot of us are on social media, and I have met a ton of people through social media and read a ton of people through social media that I would not have otherwise met or read. And I think that in a huge way, Twitter has become a big part of that. You can actually build relationships with people you might want hiring you through social media. It doesn't always work, and it takes a little bit of finesse to kind of know whether you're actually getting along with somebody or not, or whether, but I've met a lot of people that way, read a lot of people that way, and I would staff a lot of the people that I've read. How are you finding the social media aspect of it, Jose? Has that helped or hindered you?
You tend to be definitely more of an open door than me. I also read a lot slower than you. Like, I've been doing the staffing challenge, but it'll take me 2 months to get to a script just because I'm busy with my own shit, and especially pandemic times. Social media, I think the way for me it's useful, because I do tend to be a little more standoffish, is if I start to see someone in my mentions who is smart or funny or likes the same things that I do, that name will start sort of clicking into my brain. And then if they send a script to the staffing submission, I will sort of look at them first.
Like somebody has to submit them to you, and then you go like, oh, I know that person from social media. Okay, I'll read them. I'll put them on the top of the pile, right?
Right.
Oh.
But I'm not gonna. If somebody, it's hard, man, because my DMs are closed, and if somebody gets in my mentions and goes, I have a script I'd like you to read, I'm like, no.
Yeah. No. I tend to really not pay attention to people who try very hard, and then there's some people who, try. I mean, have you heard about there's a term, it's a Korean term, it's called nunchi. It's the ability to walk into a room and sort of read the room or read the person you're talking to and understand what they need and give them that in the conversation. I think there's a kind of social media nunchi, where like you can, if you're good at it, you can sort of tell who's responding to you a certain way and all of that kind of stuff. And I think we're going to have to develop that for Zoom as well, because I think in Zoom, like, a lot of your ability to read that is gone. But I think in terms of platforming yourself for staffing, without agents, with managers, with it becomes about getting your material to as many into as many like mentions as possible. You should have your material up on your social media. Obviously, you should have a Writers Guild profile page with your material on it. You should be trying to be read by showrunners who are doing the staffing challenges or the staffing boosts and all of that stuff. I think now it's kind of become a great equalizer, but there's also a lot of noise, which is what it must have been like to work as an agent. But I would work social media and a lot of the online resources a lot harder than I ever have before to get staff.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, I always found when I was with an agency that they would not be super transparent about where I was being submitted. And even with managers, they don't necessarily want to reveal their magic tricks.
Right.
But if you can get them to tell you, here's 8 shows that we think might be looking at your level, and we're submitting you, what I asked them to do was to send me that list with the showrunner so that I can look at who it is that's going to be doing the hiring. And if I have a relationship with that person, then I'll reach out myself. Or if I don't, I'll reach out to someone like Javi or John Rogers or anybody that I've worked with in the past to go, hey, your IMDb crosses with this person. Do you know them? Do you like them? Can you give a nudge? So that's a little bit of a way that you can maybe take a little bit of agency in your own staffing.
I think also knowing what's being developed, knowing what show you want to work on, and trying to focus on those, is important as well. And I think that those resources now are more available than ever because the guild has the staffing and development grids going out now. Obviously, things like deadline are like the trades are updated faster. The information gets out more nowadays. I think also kind of knowing the zeitgeist and knowing what you would like to work on, and if you are represented, making sure that your agents and managers or your managers know exactly where you want to go. I think you have to do a little bit more of that footwork now than ever, So, next question.
All right, the next question comes from Keely McDonald, and she says, do you guys think we need to address this time in scripts, or just pretend it didn't happen, or just mention it in conversation? And there was another similar question about, like, do you think that the pandemic will become part of history in pictures? Like, will people be wearing masks and referring to it, etc.?
Yes, this is like, look, we're at the beginning of. Something I tweeted about this is the thing I'll be talking. I finally know what the conversation is I'm going to have for the next 50 years, and I do believe that. I think that this is the defining event of everyone's lives because it is worldwide, and I think it's the first time that a pandemic has happened with this amount of interconnection in the world. Everybody's going through it together. It's global. We're all talking about it. We all have platforms to talk about it internationally. So we are communing with people who are on the other side of the world about what they're going through and so forth. I don't know that I'm going to start writing pilots where there's people in masks and stuff like that. But then again, I'm more likely to write a science fiction pilot right now for that exact same reason, because I don't know. I think that if I had to tell you what I think is going to happen in the short term is I think a lot more material you're going to see being bought and coming out is going to be feel-good material or horror material where the metaphor is not completely sledgehammer. Because I think people will want to cathartically dispel their anxiety through either laughter or through fear. So I think that those are going to be very, very important in the coming months. And look, I think that it's like if it were 1941 and we were talking about how the war is going to affect writing post-war, it's a little too early to tell, but I think that this is it. This is, we didn't get a world war. We don't get to go out and die bravely for our country and do horrible things and then drink a lot and never talk about it again. But we don't. I hope not. I'm glad I wasn't in the Greatest Generation and what they had to do and suffer. So, but this is ours. This is what we have. And I think this is going to be a facet of our lives moving forward entirely. And we have to kind of see how. And look, the other thing is, I don't think that this will be over. There may be a vaccine, there may be a test and all of that. But I mean, the flu vaccine didn't make the flu go away. And we still lived in a world where there was flu season and flu vaccine season and all of that. So I think we might be looking at a rollout of a world in which this is commonplace and managing this is commonplace. So I think that, you have to kind of give it a little bit of time and let it settle. It's the same thing as not having written the great American novel yet. You don't have to,
Yeah, I think that's totally right, which is, I wouldn't go back into specs to make them more contemporary by adding masks or mentions of the virus or anything like that. If your sample is good and solid, it'll stand without having to be updated for the new normal. And in terms of like writing or anticipating what new material is going to look like in the wake of the coronavirus, even it's funny. I got into a conversation with Julie Pleck on Twitter, and she was sort of putting out feelers about what do we think it's going to look like. And my feeling is that it's impossible to tell. After 9/11, I think a lot of people probably expected that we would get a lot of comedies and a lot of feel-good stuff. And instead, to me, it felt like shit went really dark. We got stuff like Homeland. We got stuff like we got a lot of bleakness. I think we were feeling the darkness as Americans, and I feel like that was reflected in what the artists were putting out there. But it's the metaphor I think you're talking about is absolutely right, because for my money, one of the greatest post 9/11 shows that was reflective of 9/11 was Battlestar Galactica, which didn't talk about obviously those events, but it was a very clear metaphor for what America had turned into post 9/11. So it is a little too early to look at that. I wouldn't try to get in front of the curve, but I would anticipate that we're gonna be dealing with this. We're gonna be processing this and trying to find some level of catharsis for God knows how long.
But I would say that it's, rather than trying to capture a verisimilitude for now and all of that, I would say try to find the story to tell that is going to give your audience that sense of, not that you're not looking for that anyway, but I think that catharsis is going to be really important. I think that being able to write material that gives people that sense of release, whether it's through bleakness or through comedy or whatever it is, I think is going to be very important, which is very generic advice. Write a really good script with catharsis. I know that's stupid, and I apologize. But it's
also,
sort of...
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Also, hashtag too soon. It took us a long time after 9/11 to be able to deal with it. Certainly to make jokes about it, but nobody wanted to see a terrorist attack of any sort on TV or movies. So we're gonna need a minute to let this breathe. I wouldn't be in any hurry to try to get sort of the national zeitgeist for how people are feeling.
Yeah. Okay, so we're at 1 p.m. Let's do one last question and then return to our normally scheduled quarantine. By the way, for all of you 110 people who are still here, I think at our peak we had 124. Thank you so much for being a part of this. We really appreciate that you have made time to spend with us, and we really appreciate your questions. So thank you so much. One last.
We're doing this every couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, I hope so. Let's see how well this went. We'll let our guild handlers let us know if they think this is a going concern. Okay, last question.
All right, last question. This one comes anonymously. I'm a mid-level writer looking to take my career to the next level, and I'm feeling like I could use an industry mentor, a writer farther up the food chain. How would you, or have you, gone about creating mentorship for yourself? How might I find someone? Ask people? Pay people? Any thoughts?
Don't pay people.
Don't pay anybody. Don't pay anybody anything. Anybody who's taking money from you is not a mentor. They're something else. I think that it's really easy to fall into the trap of, there's a seminar, there's a webinar, there's a thing. And look, you're a mid-level writer. That means you've been staffed in several places. I think that means that for people in your position, mentorship. I find that mentorship is something that you fall into, or being a mentee is something you fall into rather than something that you ask for. I find that whenever somebody sort of without knowing me comes up and says, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" I'm like, "Whoa." But apparently, I don't know, Jose, do you feel like you have a lot of mentees? And how have they come to you?
It's not like, when you're in like junior high and dating, you don't go, "Hey, do you want to be my steady?" It is something that just kind of happens. And there's people that I consider my mentees who I don't know if they consider me their mentor, and maybe vice versa. I would say, especially since you've been on a couple of shows, if there's someone that that you like and respect, don't be shy about inviting them to lunch or coffee or dinner or drinks, and let them tell you how much time they have or don't have. And sort of play that a little bit like the dating game. Like if they have no interest or they put you off for that lunch, dinner date, then maybe they don't really want to take you under their wing.
So much of what we do. I'm sorry, Jose. I cut you off, so I must have meant it, but I apologize. So much, Jose, bring up this dating metaphor is so much of what we do here, because this is a business of relationships. And it's very easy to think, I'll do networking. I'll call a bunch of people and see if they'll read my script. And it's like, no, it's like when you ask someone on a date, you don't go up to them and say, "Hey, I'd like to go on a date with you because I'm looking for a husband." Like you don't lead with that. You're like, you play it a little bit. There's social kind of conventions to us. And I think what Jose said is exactly right. And look, I have people sending me messages on Twitter constantly, people that I don't know who are maybe on a show and something happened and they need advice or whatever. I try to field all of those questions, like all of those DMs and all that as much as possible, especially if it's somebody who's in a show and they're in a weird situation and they need some outside counsel. So, I mean, it can be as simple as that. I mean, if you're following me on Twitter and you send me a question via DM about something that's going on with you, I'll most likely answer. And that's usually the gateway to that. So, I mean, Jose, how do you get your mentees?
What we were talking about Twitter earlier is really a part of it. Like, if I see you in my mentions and I like you and I think you're funny and smart, then I'll be much more likely to be like open to a coffee or something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's your etiquette? It's funny, and I'll tell you off air why it's specifically funny. But when someone asks you to a meal or a coffee, who buys? Who pays?
I always pay.
Who?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Like, I mean, look, I'm allegedly a showrunner and a creator and an executive producer of shows and all that. I don't have a great, many material wants at this point, and it's like, I always tell people, even if they ask me, I say, I'm taking you to coffee, when you're where I'm at, then you can take people to coffee, right. Then pay for the coffee, like take people to coffee when, you have, or even now, if you get anything from this, take the next person out to coffee. So I always think that I think whoever's at the higher level, in terms of the career and all of that should get the coffee or the lunch. I think that.
Here's what I would say. I'm inclined to agree with you, but here's what I would say. Offer to pick up the check.
Oh, yeah.
Because you are being done the favor.
Yes.
Someone is taking time out of their life and career to come and help you out. So either pick it up or offer to pick it up and then go Dutch, or let the other person pay if they insist.
Yeah. I would also say that if you're asking me or Jose to go have coffee with you, and the first question you ask is, how do you get an agent? I always say the same thing. Jose and I recorded a podcast called Children of Tendu that's out there, and it answers all of the basic questions. So I would rather that you have listened to at least the episodes that are germane to your question before you take up some of my time, because we did that specifically because there's so many questions we get asked so much, and we wanted that podcast to be like literally a portable mentorship and a portable education. So, when people ask me to go to coffee with them, and I wind up telling them all about my podcast, and for me that's sort of wasted time because I already did the podcast. I'd rather talk to somebody who's at the next level.
Right, 100%.
Yeah. So, but look, you got a question? DM me on Twitter. I will most likely answer you. And I have people who are now friends of mine who our relationship started exactly like that. They're like, hey, my showrunner told me to do this. Is that normal? And I write back, no, that's fucked up. Don't do it. And then now I talk to those people all the time. So, again, it's not about it's not about saying I need to find a wife. I'm going to go date and tell everybody that's what I'm looking for. It's more like, who do I meet? Who do I know? Who do I like? Who can I ask this favor of? And organically it happens that way.
Yeah. But, you don't be shy. If there's people that you've worked with, you're not going to find a wife if you don't ask girls on dates.
That's true. So, and on that note, and Jose and I are both married. So you guys, right? I'm sorry?
On the note of me giving dating advice, which is pressure.
Yeah, I feel the same way about any advice I might have on that, but it's okay. So, okay, well, everybody, thank you so much, and we'll hopefully do this again very soon. We're really, really thrilled to be able to talk to you this way. Thank you.
Deb and Doug, should we hang on for a debrief, or how should we disconnect from?
There's a little button there's a little red phone button here. Should I just push that?
Yeah. Hold on one sec. We'll say goodbye to everybody else, and then if you guys want to hang on for 1 minute.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.